Greetings to everyone who chose to be part of today's conversation. We know that many colleagues have joined from many parts of the world, so if preferred, you may use the Show Captions button in the bottom menu to choose the language of your preference for a smoother participation in the event. This is the first thought leadership event organized under the ECOS Institute, an initiative that is grounded in the belief that a strong field needs strong connections and constant nurturing across actors, sectors, and responsibilities. When we planned this event, we were not envisaging to be again shattered by the devastating war news. It is for this reason that we regret that our colleague and friend, Dr. Ghassan Issa, the director of the Early Childhood Arab Network, for objective reasons, cannot participate in the discussion. He's okay. Our thoughts are with him, as well as with all children and adults who are witnessing life-threatening situations. That motivates us even more to discuss today how we can make this world understand and act more decisively in safeguarding not only children's lives, but their precious right to grow, to play, to learn and develop, to be happy as a quintessential human and collective responsibility. Over the past decades, early childhood has made undeniable progress. We have stronger research, we have more global frameworks and tools and toolkits, we have more cross-sectoral initiatives, we have more recognition in policy language. In many countries, access has expanded. In other, quality standards have improved. The field is not where it was 20 years ago, and yet, we are not where we thought we would be. Despite all evidence, despite compelling arguments and moral appeals, early childhood still struggles to become politically non-negotiable. It is supported, rhetorically embraced, but structurally postponed. It is valued, but still vulnerable. So perhaps the question is no longer whether early childhood matters. The question is, why have so many different arguments? Economic returns, brain science, school readiness, human capital, children's rights, name it, not been sufficient to secure a durable political priority. Have we relied too heavily on evidence alone? Have we fragmented our narratives across sectors? Have we been persuasive but not powerful? Yes, today's conversation is not about restating why early childhood matters. It is about asking with honesty and maturity, what might not be working in the way we advocate, we organize ourselves, we position the field. We will first examine where we might be stuck. Then we may imagine what true breakthrough would look like to become a priority. And finally, ask ourselves what must shift in our narratives, in our partnerships, and perhaps even in ourselves. This is not a conversation about who is to be blamed, but a conversation about being more effective. Because if we are serious about breaking through, we must be willing to examine our own strategy, not only external barriers. Let me briefly introduce you the voices joining us today and different vantage points they bring into this conversation. Lynette Okengo is the Executive Director of African Early Childhood Network. Lynette works across countries and systems that are rapidly evolving, where demographic growth, urbanization, and inequality shape the stakes for early childhood. She brings both grassroots awareness and continental strategy to this conversation. Ivanka Kalapatova joins us with direct government experience, having served as Bulgaria's Ministry of Labor and Social Policy. She has been inside that room where priorities compete and budgets are negotiated. Her perspective reminds us what political decisions making actually looks like beyond advocacy spaces. Michael Feigelson is the CEO of Leer Foundation. Michael works at the intersection of philanthropy, system change, and public policy, constantly navigating the question of how innovation connects to real change and government responsibility. He brings a global lens of what it takes to move from promising pilots to durable public commitments. Michel van der Broek, Professor Emeritus at Ghent University, brings decades of research and critical reflection on early childhood systems, challenging us not only to think about what works, but also about values and power dynamics embedded in how we design and defend those systems. Lastly, but not leastly, Joan Lombardi is the adjunct professor at the Stanford Center on Early Childhood, a co-founder of Georgetown Collaborative on Global Children's Issues. Over decades, she has helped shape early childhood policy at national and global levels, always asking not only how to expand services, but how to anchor early childhood with broader commitments to equity, democracy, intergenerational responsibility, and so on. Joan has navigated exactly the tension we are discussing today between evidence and politics, ambition and feasibility, urgency and long-term systems change. Together, I think this is a rare mix of highly experienced actors from government, philanthropy, regional movements, critical scholarship across continents and contexts. Exactly the kind of diversity we need for this conversation. Throughout today's discussion, we invite you to reflect and share your insight on three aspects of the conversation that we will have actually with our guest speakers. And we will invite you to use the Mentimeter code that will be shared by my colleagues. You perhaps already know, www.mentimeter.com and share and insert the code. What we will ask you is, what is one thing we should stop doing in the field? The second is, one thing we must start doing in the field. And the third one mindset we must shift. You can contribute with your thoughts on these questions at your own pace by moving from one slide to the other. There's not a pressure. We will come back later to the answers that we will have collected. We also welcome everyone here to continue the conversation with today's speakers and all other participants, as well as the wider community on our ECOS LinkedIn channel. Please subscribe in case you did not yet do it, and kindly invite you to engage with our reactions after the event. This is a conversation that needs to continue, it does not have to stop today. And one more thing before we start, another invitation. At ECO's heart sits the various opportunities for learning which are instrumental for strengthening the field. Please visit the webpage we are sharing now with you with a lineup of live learning sessions that are starting this month. We've just added videos of the facilitators who explain what the courses are about. So we encourage you to please share this in your networks, because the farther we reach, the higher the chances to meet learning needs of the early childhood workforce across sectors, countries, and continents. Thank you so much. So finally, we're diving into the discussion. And the first part will focus, as I was mentioning, on why are we stuck, or where are we stuck? Why hasn't early childhood broken into through being a priority? In other words, if early childhood is widely recognized as essential, why does it still struggle to command political priority, sustained funding, public urgency? What is it about the way the field operates? Is it about language, structures, the way of working that makes it still easy to support rhetorically, but easy to postpone also in practice? I will start by inviting Michel van der Broek. So, Michel, what is your view? You've been in the field for a long time and have witnessed a lot of developments over the past decades. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mihaela, and thank you also for inviting me to this very interesting panel. I think we suffer from what historians call path dependency, meaning that the future is very much dependent on what has been because policy makers find it difficult to change the course of history. I will explain what I mean. I mean that the early years have been predominantly in the history, the services, the provision for the early years have been predominantly the product of policies on poverty, meaning, for instance, combating child mortality, policies of hygiene, policies of charity. And so they were, for a very long time, considered as what has been written about as a necessary evil. We very much invested by ideologies of motherhood. And that changed fundamentally, I would say, post-World War II. In many countries, thanks to the upcoming of feminism and the right to labor for women, but they kept this economic reasoning. Why was early childhood necessary? Because women wanted to go to work. And so it was still a caring rather than an educational perspective that dominated the field. And that economic the economic paradigm made that, of course, countries invested in increasing the number of places, but from an economic perspective, which means as much possible places for the least possible costs, which jeopardized the quality, but also the quality, but not only the quality for the children, but also the social value of these institutions. And I think we're still part of that. If we look at what happened over, let's say, the last 2 decades, especially last 2 to 3 decades, we've seen that the early childhood education has increasingly also been framed as an educational advantage, educationally important for the future learning of children. But still, the argument is an economic one. It's about a return of investment in children. And so this means that I think this is a salient example of path dependency on how the past, the history, still dominates our present narratives on early childhood education. Even if they are now educational in nature, they are still economic as a return on investment. But if the reason is economic return on investment, then still you should look at the least possible cost for the maximum return. I am not sure that continuing on that solely economic. I'm not denying that there is an economic reason in early childhood education, but this sole dominant focus on economic arguments is what has been prevalent over the last 150 years. So I am not convinced that if we go on the same path, we will change the future.
Thank you, Michelle. Let's hear what the others are thinking. Where do we think that something, where did we get stuck? Michael, how do you see it?
So I, as you know, because we talked about it before, feel a little bit differently. I will answer the question, but I actually think we have broken through quite a bit. I think in the 20 years that I've been doing this, and in the 50 years or 60 years since I think this has been constituted as a field, I think the progress is quite exceptional. I think it's a pretty big deal to go from a lot of people thinking there's nothing going on in babies' brains to a lot of people thinking they're the fastest learners on the planet. I think it's a pretty big deal to see massive expansion of preschool education. I think this secular trend for paternity leave is very, very positive, and also for maternity leave. I think there's more and more, when I started in this field, people would say it shouldn't be in the first lady's office, it should be in the president's office. I think that's happening, and more executives are taking this on board. So I just wanted to say that I I would argue that there's been incredible breakthrough, especially in the last 20 years. The only part of the world where I see a little bit of backsliding is Europe. But everywhere else, I see a lot of progress and quite fast. And I would ask the question, in addition to what have we been doing wrong, what is it that we've been doing right that we should double down on? But maybe I'll come back to that when we get to the question of breakthroughs. In terms of the answer to your question, or the question I would have wanted to be asked, which is why aren't we breaking through faster? I think there's a couple of things. One is I think that the field has too much of a long-term focus, too much of a long-term narrative. I don't think focusing on the children are our future is a salient political argument. It's too long-term, and humans discount the long term. This is something we know very well. So I think there actually needs to be more of a focus on the short-term impact and the short-term value. And if you're a mom or a dad and you don't have childcare, and the next day you do have childcare, I promise there is enormous short-term value. So I think because we have this wonderful longitudinal evidence that other fields don't, we sort of maybe have leaned too far into the long-term arguments. I also think that our arguments are far too rational. So I think we make arguments that are logical, based on evidence, and I think that's great to have in the mix, but it's also not the way that humans work. We're affective creatures. We do what our peers do. We're very communal. So I think there are other arguments that should actually come before the rational ones, and make people more motivated and move faster. So that is the second. I think we need to be less rational and more short-term focused. And I would agree that the last argument I would use in my sequence is the economic one. So I agree with Michelle in that sense, but for a different reason. I heard you, Michelle, talking about it from a kind of a values-based perspective. I just think it's the least effective argument, and it's the evidence-based that's easiest to dismantle if you want to, because so much of it is based on projections. So I think these are some of the things that I would suggest to do differently. I would also say one of the things that's inherently difficult about this field is it is hard and expensive to do at scale. It really is. And I don't think that we should. Sometimes we make it seem like this is going to be cheap. We call it cost effective, but it's not going to be a major budgetary implication for a government, for example. And the reality, to do it well, it is going to be one. And so we need to build a narrative and a case around that, as opposed to making it feel like it's something that you can do on the cheap. So these are kind of a few thoughts of things I would be doing differently, but I did want to start by saying I think that we are breaking through every day more so.
Thank you, Michael. I think that you already kind of start some provocative thinking around the table, and I think also among our participants. I think that you said it very well. It's a field that has grown and perhaps has reached some kind of maturity. So in order for us to get there, we had to look for evidence. We had to back up with all possible reasons to claim that this is so important. On the other hand, I think that because there is a competing policy market, so to call, so some other policies or other areas of the society development are costing also a lot, and they might cost even more. So it's like how this one should also be considered as untouchable, get to the point where there is awareness of how much it costs, but to be non-negotiable up to a certain point. Yes, in comparing with other policy areas, for the reasons that we have so clearly built up as a narrative. I want to hear now other reactions. So Ivanka, you've listened carefully and you had two perspectives. I appreciate anyways, Michael's input into, we are far, it's true, we are far. And we have, I think that we broke through in certain areas and perhaps in of the public life, but much more than we have had. What is your perception? You've been also working in government, so I don't know how hard it is there to convince, your peers about how important this field is and the investment in early years.
I very much like what the colleagues shared so far, and yes, I agree with the fact that we have a lot of progress. Probably one of the progress of Bulgaria is to nominate and have a minister who has an ECD academic and practical background, which is news, right? So there is a lot of progress in terms of positioning this agenda. From my experience as a researcher, but also practitioner and a minister, I can say that my hardest challenge to really overcome in my different roles was this strong institutional fragmentation, which we notice. And this is what Michelle said at the beginning, that sometimes ECD is related to poverty alleviation policies, sometimes it's to educational policies, very rarely, at least in Eastern Europe and in Bulgaria, to health and holistic development from the point of view of the nurturing care framework. That's a challenge which I really hope we can find a solution around, because ECD obviously sits across multiple sectors, and this reflects the holistic nature of child development. But administratively, it often produces a diffusion of responsibility, like each sector sees a part of the picture, yet no single institution very often feels fully accountable for the whole. And as a result, early childhood frequently becomes everyone's priority in a way, but no one's responsibility in practice. And my experience as a minister is also related to the fact how our government organizes public finances, because it is very traditional way how they're organized. Usually, structurally, money flows vertically by sector. So when I was negotiating for a new vision for new social investment, the key question of the finance minister was like, but which system should we subsidize more? And the question is, well, the three of them or even the five of them. So these are some of the challenges, and I very much agree with what Michael said about this misalignment between political cycles and developmental timelines. Like, political systems reward policies that produce visible results within relatively short time. I mean, my mandate was for 10 months, so how can I justify my success to invest more in early childhood development over 10 months time frame? So this return of investment is substantial as a concept, but political incentives are very often delayed. So I believe these kind of challenges from political point of view is something that we as a community need to find solutions in order to tackle better in the future and really find this breakthrough which we need, because and I finish with this, one of the sentences as I usually used to win a debate as a minister was, young children develop so fast that we cannot be late. We have to be fast in decisions, investments, and be brave. So I'll finish with this, my interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivanka. I mean, we would love to hear that from more policymakers, obviously. I think that we might not all agree how much there has been or not a breakthrough, but I think that there might be different perspectives here at play. And Some might feel that, and I think it very much depends from where you come in this field, how you feel that if it is or not a breakthrough. And with all the respect for those that are thinking, and that's very encouraging, that means that a lot of good work has been done so far. However, I think that there are many that are still having a frustration that much more can be, and perhaps, as you said, Michael, much faster can be done so that we catch up with child's development. Lynette, I don't know, what do you think about, did we break through? Are we far from breaking through, or we just need to make faster progress?
Thank you very much, Mihaela. I would agree that we have made amazing progress. I mean, just 10 years ago, and I'm sorry, my bandwidth is not so good. I will not have my video on. We've made a lot of progress. In our region, for instance, 10 years ago, I think it was just 10% of the countries or something like that that had policies to really guide the implementation of the program. Now we have many more, over 60%. We never had within the government structure as somebody who even had a title like ECD focal point. Now we have those in the ministries of health, in education, and different places. We are seeing more and more programs, different types of programs that are being designed for home-based, marketplace. We have, different school-based arrangements. Lots of progress in terms of access. We're seeing new initiatives to improve the quality, the training of the caregivers, and so on. And as you said earlier, Mihaela, there's been a proliferation of evidence. I mean, now there's so much more argument that can be put forward to make a case for early childhood. I think we could move faster, and we should think about rethinking our strategy, because all this evidence has not necessarily translated to power that we need to unlock finances, particularly domestic finances. I mean, why are early childhood programs financed externally? Why aren't governments putting money in the early childhood programs? So I think also that we are a little bit far with a breakthrough, because we are not seeing political leaders coming up and using it as an issue, a political issue. There's no political incentive. Our babies don't vote. Our caregivers are usually the most disempowered. Our parents sometimes are not so placing the right demand for quality early childhood. So there's a lot that still needs to be done to shift our focus from growing evidence and increased number of policies to expanding our power base, to make sure that we are actually moving the machine that can result in more funding and greater quality programs. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynette. I think that you pointed to something that at least my attention was triggered. It's not that we did not break through, it's only that we did not break through where we would have wanted. And that's the part that mostly the political accountability, assuming responsibility. However, even then, the top-down policies might not necessarily work. So it could be, but I think it is a question of how much we have socialized the importance of early years in our societies. Maybe, I'm just saying, because it could be that there are many other levers that have not been exploited and could actually become an engine of pressure, demand, and even, I would say, solidarity for it. That is a good, I would say, entry to our second section of the discussion. So we understood to a certain extent where we are stuck, but now let's imagine that we all agree that we have had the breakthrough to early childhood is a priority. Yes, it is seen, it is recognized, it is valued, and is supported. Now, what actually we would see would be different then in this case? What we would like, not we would like, we would see that is different in the way that decisions are made or the resources are allocated or the field is moving and organizing itself. And what would be non-negotiable in that future that we would imagine that it really broke through. So things that today perhaps are considered optional or, some wishful. Yeah. Let's see. Michael, could you continue now? How is in your future? I mean, you're kind of in the present because you said that we already broke through. But let's see if really this is becoming non-negotiable. Yeah, everybody agrees. It's a top priority. We don't discuss this. It's just something that is safely insured. How would that look like? How would that work?
So just to say, I guess what I also am reacting to is I don't think there's a moment when you break through. I don't think that's the way it works. I think it's a much more fluid process over time, and that the pace of progress has been increasing substantially over the last 20 years in most places where I've had exposure or where we work. And so the question is how to further increase the pace of progress by looking at what's worked and doubling down on that, as well as stopping doing certain things. So I think that's maybe what I was trying to say in the first instance, and I'll answer your question, the second question, but I do think as a community that we have a tendency to talk about why we're not breaking through or what's not working. And as we've seen, for better or for worse in the world, you tell a story and that story becomes reality, not the other way around. And so which community would you want to be part of? The community that talks about what's not working or it's not breaking through, or the community that says we're breaking through, we're doing this, come along for the ride or be left behind? And I think we need to take our space at the table, and that should be our story, even if there's a long way to go. So if that story were told and we started to progress faster, what would I want to see in reality? I mean, there's far too many things to name, so I'll just focus on three that I think are really important and where I think there's opportunity. So one is I think that screening and support for maternal mental health in the during pregnancy and the postpartum period would become non-negotiable, essential, done all over the world as a standard part of primary health care. So that's one that I think is moving, but that should be unquestionable. The second is childcare, quality childcare. I think should have the same status as primary school or
you mean
preschool.
Education and care, right?
No, I actually mean childcare, and I think that I understand that it should be pedagogically sound, but I think actually it's a mistake to emphasize all the time education, because care is also of very high value, and so I actually mean to say childcare. So that's the second piece of this. I actually think in some situations the emphasis on like forcing people to think about it as education as opposed to care has been a disservice.
Yeah, but not exactly, but not opposed together.
Yeah. Again, from a sort of a political standpoint, advocacy standpoint, sort of it's too complicated. Childcare is sort of the phrase that I would focus on, and I've seen get a lot more traction. But since we're in this sort of room, I would say that there should be an option for parents who are certainly who are working, but also those who aren't working, where their kids can spend time and be in enriched, loving environment where they are not worried, and they can get some time for themselves, or sort of be at work without thinking about this. That should be available in the way that primary school is available today. So that would be the second one. And the third would be around parental leave, also being universally available for both parents, longer and paid. So these in my fantasy of what a breakthrough would look like. It would include other things too, but these are the three I wanted to emphasize because I think it makes I think that investing in parents is investing in children, and I think these three are investments in them, and that we don't haven't had as much breakthroughs on that front, perhaps as we could.
Thank you. Really interesting to discuss further. Ivanka, what do you think? What will in your future, or I don't know, it may be present, it's becoming relative, the breakthrough would look like? Yes, what would be non-negotiable
Thank you, Mihaela.
for you?
And it will be future because it's my main cause, early childhood development. First of all, I would like to thank you for this brilliant question, which made me really think what a true breakthrough would require. And being a transformational leader, I would like to share with you just several reflections, which it will be great for us to debate. I think the first reflection is about leadership. And I've been thinking, what if we invest in change tomorrow by investing in early childhood leaders today? For early childhood to really become a structural political priority, I believe our field needs leaders who are able to operate beyond the borders of our sector, so to say. Leaders who really understand governance systems, public finance, public policy processes, leaders who can really engage effectively with ministers of finance, with prime ministers, national assemblies, so that our story, our narrative can really be heard and it can be tailored in a way that really we can translate science into policy, budgets, and national priorities. So probably this is one of the breakthrough priorities we can focus our efforts more. The second reflection that I've had in terms of having even a better breakthrough concerns evidence. So what if every region around the world had strong research hubs which generate locally relevant evidence on early childhood? Because I have often received the question, okay, Vanka, you are quoting data from Western European countries, from the United States, but how is this relevant to Eastern Europe and to Bulgaria? So how does this apply to our national context? So this is something that I've struggled because we don't generate regionally adapted evidence so much. And as we know, evidence travels better when it speaks the language of the local policy context. The third reflection that I've had in terms of this breakthrough is political awareness. Today, there is already a strong body of evidence demonstrating the long-term benefits of investing in early childhood. Yet political awareness, and this is my true experience of this evidence, remains surprisingly limited. So I believe that if we want early childhood to become a real political priority urgently, not after 10 years, we need to translate research into clear arguments about the economic productivity, competitiveness, the workforce readiness, social stability, even peace, if you want, given the news in the last several days. And the last reflection, I think, concerns representation and influence. What if our community, the one dedicated to ECD, was systemically present where major development priorities and financial decisions are made? This includes global development platforms, regional political institutions, and economic policy discussions to really have in their dashboards for monitoring progress, ECD investments and results. This is something that I didn't find as a social minister, and I will never forget when we had the Council of Ministers meetings in Brussels. We would follow the social scoreboard in terms of employment, poverty level, but nothing about early childhood development impact and progress as the foundation for every other indicator in the dashboard. And of course, that was not very good for me because I was angry about this. So these are my reflections and potential areas for our community now, thanks to the ECOS Institute. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ivanka, specifically for bringing up the idea of having ECD as part of any type of development framework, that the future-proof development, yes, that from what we have learned when we worked in the ECD campaign, the first years was priority. It was hard to find data in not only how we are progressing, but to find where we are in disaggregated data by age. So it was this is like basic information that would just show us that it's part of the tissue of development, of the development of that country. And it's not there. So I'm really glad that you brought this into the discussion. As well as, for example, looking at the countdown 2030, if you look at how many countries have an ECD strategy and what kind of indicators are tracked down, the number of countries that have an ECD or strategy itself, or the indicators, it's totally unbalanced. I mean, for me, this would be a breakthrough. I mean, do we really think comprehensively, holistically at child development? At the governmental level. Let's see some quick reactions, yeah. Lynette and Michelle, please.
And a quick reaction about role of evidence. Maybe I should situate from what perspective I speak. So I speak clearly from European, a Western perspective. My global knowledge is limited. And I've been working for about 20 years in practice. Then I've been working for about 20 years in science, in the academia. And I now work in policy because I'm a policy advisor for the minister responsible for early childhood education. And I have less faith in evidence, and I say that as a former academic, less faith in evidence than you seem to have, Ivanka, because I have not seen many examples where policymakers change their mind because of scientific findings. I have rather the impression that policymakers would seek the science that supports the vision they already have, rather than the other way around. So yes, we need indicators. And we need like league tables with indicators, etc., so that we can see how far are we. But let's not be naive and thinking that when we clearly show what the benefits of early childhood education are, the policies will shift magically. They will not. I think we need some other kind of evidence. And I strongly believe that, and there are many examples of that innovation does not come from science nor from policy, but from practice, local, from civil society. And what does influence policymakers is to bring them to where the change happens, to let them see, to let them witness, to make visits to the civil society that makes a difference. Policy seems to me to be much less rational than we usually think this. But it's just a brief comment on the role of evidence that you made. And this is not to say that we do not need these indicators by age, by comparing country spending, percentage of gross national product, whatever. But let's not think our future depends on that. I think there's more to be done in supporting those civil society organizations that do make differences, and then look with them how we can scale up. And that's why we need the policymakers.
Thank you, Michelle. I just want to see if Lynette has any reaction about what has been said, or you want to add anything about the non-negotiables in future or present. Yeah, please,
yes,
Lynette.
or present. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think for me, the non-negotiable would be the circle of care around the child. If the professionals who are working with the children are the worst recognized, the poorest paid, they have no very low certification, they're not unionizable, they are just generally a neglected group of people, we can't expect to see much change in our children and in the way our programs are run. So for me, a non-negotiable, honestly, for us to talk about a breakthrough is when we begin to see the workforce around the children being dignified, being properly compensated for what they're doing, because this is a serious investment. And yet, we always, if you go to some countries, workforce is voluntary. They are given T-shirts for the service. Who lives on T-shirts? Things like those. How we professionalize and appreciate and dignify the workforce says a lot about which way we want to take this issue. Thanks.
Much appreciated, Lynette. Very good point. In whatever direction we want to go, faster or slower, the workforce, those that are actually taking care of, working directly or indirectly with children, because here it's a very complex, actually, category when we talk about early childhood workforce. It's quite complex, but inside of it, there are actually categories that are not seen, not recognized, not compensated, formally, non-formally engaged in the field, and they're actually the ones that are the invisible makers of the early childhood system in many of the countries. We're going to move to the last section. And I think we kind of pointed to that. And I think that that's the part that we may start articulating, and then we will go back to also what our colleagues, our participants have shared their thoughts of what we should stop, start, and shift in the way that we are operating in the field. So the last question is about what has to change to get to that future, to what we have mentioned as would be the so-called breakthrough as a priority. What we need to change, what we should do differently to put early childhood at the center of policymaker and of social responsibility. Also to build perhaps more coherence, more confidence, and collective power that is required for this breakthrough. And we said, okay, we have evidence, but maybe there is another type of narrative that is more powerful that we need to build. So we talked about, there are lots of instruments already out there, be that of advocacy nature or policy influencing or orienting the practice. But still, we work in technical silos. So what actually we should do differently? That's the question now. So I will invite first Lynette to share.
Thank you.
If you were to suggest, this is what I think that we should definitely do totally differently.
I think we should totally change our language. It's ECED, it's ECD, it is nurturing care, it is foundational learning. We are always introducing new things that are just confusing governments and confusing people. If we just spoke about our children and what our children need and how we can provide this, I think it would be easier to understand, maybe even easier for people to begin thinking about implementing. Yeah, so the language, I think, for me sometimes is really confusing. But then there's something else, and this is something I picked from Joan Lombardi. She said early childhood now needs to have some height. We have operated as dwarfs for too long. In government, we are in the Ministry of Social Welfare Community or something like that. We are in the small places, operating, small budgets. Everything is, we're positioned as a moral issue. This is something that is good for the mothers. It's not. This is something that is good for everybody, so giving ourselves, early childhood needs to have some height. Where are we positioned? How are we speaking about the issue? How are we positioning the children? How are we positioning the workforce? What kind of targets do we have? Are we dreaming big for this sector? Or do we continue to operate in the shadows and being very apologetic? Last week we had Elizabeth Lule, who always says that early childhood advocates are very polite. We are tiptoeing around issues. We need to be a little bit more militant. Are we serious about this issue or not? If we are, let's give it our best, give it some height, give it lots of energy, and it will move forward. I like what Michael said. I don't want to be part of the group that says it's not working. We will recognize what needs to change, but let's put our weight behind what can be different and really hope to see big things and having early childhood rising to some big national system. Thanks.
Thank you, Leland. I'm going to give the word now to Michael. So what we should stop doing, what we should do differently. No, we already said what we stopped. What should we really do differently?
I like what Lynette said about not being apologetic. I think this sort of, we behave almost as if we're insecure about this. We marginalize ourselves. And, if in the world today, everybody is looking for meaning, looking for purpose, looking for some form of hope, looking for some form of salvation. And we have probably the best issue to give an answer to that. Like it is one of the most relatable topics in the history of humanity, in the history of the species, also for other species. It is incredibly emotive, incredibly powerful. And I think what's powerful about the science is not that it changes your mind, is that it explains to your mind something you can feel. And when the science has been most effective, in my experience, is not when it has taught somebody something new, but when it has unleashed them because it validated something they could feel but couldn't explain. That's the value for me of the science. So I think we need to have more self-confidence and rather than ask permission to join the party, we should let people know that we are the party and we are breaking through and we are doing this and they're welcome to join. So that in terms of an overall approach, and it was Lynette saying, like, we have nothing to apologize for, far from it. So we shouldn't be tiptoeing. I think the two other things I wanted to say were that when we think about a breakthrough, the question I would ask was, how do you have a cultural breakthrough? Not how do you have a policy breakthrough? And I would try to find language that would help with that question. And that's much harder. And it requires a totally different thinking about language. But I think that policy follows culture more than the reverse. And that we need to think creatively about that. We had a conversation at Leer the other day about our own sort of narrative and communication strategy. And, I think that we should think about the communication strategy for this field as if it were a show. So people would watch it because it's a show, because it's entertaining, and who are the characters, and it has to demand that level of attention, not as PR for a minister or a foundation, but it should have the same quality of attention capture that you would find in a show. And then the last is political breakthrough, and there I would say two things. In our experience, there are people with real power who care about this issue and want to do something. I would start with them, find them, help them, as opposed to going to the ones who maybe have a little more power, but you need to convince. And the reason I think this is valuable is because when they start to do things, other people see the value in it. We've seen this a lot with mayors deciding this as their legacy issue. The mayor of Addis Ababa, for example, or the mayor of Boa Vista in Brazil, two that come to mind immediately. And so finding those folks, really spending the time, not necessarily in the ministry with the longest name, but the shortest budget, as somebody once put to me, and helping them to do that, and then really telling their story, because I think a signal of a real political breakthrough is when people start running on this topic. And you've seen a little bit of it in some places in the world. I've seen 5 or 6 mayors run on this topic as their legacy issue. And how do you get more people to do that? But in a world that is not inspiring hope at the moment, I find an immense amount of joy and hope and beauty and refuge in this topic, and I think that's what we have to offer, and we shouldn't short sell it.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Okay, what is the reaction here? So let's see. Michelle?
Well, I've always been amazed by how early childhood education does not sell one of its unique features. I mean that when we document the benefits of early childhood education, for instance, for children, we talk about the benefits for their cognitive development, their executive function, their socio-emotional development, etc. These are individual benefits for individual children. When we talk about the economic benefits, we talk about the benefits for the labor position of women, the gender equality, and these are measured or presented as individual benefits for individual women. We very little talk about what is the essence of early childhood education, which is the social. I mean, in essence, an early childhood center is a group, and we speak about it as if it is a number of individuals, but it's not. It's a group, and it's what makes them unique. And we see, at least in Europe, we see birth rates going down. We see children who have less and less social contacts. But on the other side, if we look at societies, we see polarization, we see democracy that is endangered. We see far right coming up. So we see some of the essence of how we live together that is challenged. And we have something to offer to that society precisely on where it is endangered. And so I think this is a narrative that we should develop much more, is what we need, what we offer beyond what we offer to children, what we offer to parents. There's something we offer to societies, and it's something that societies today really, really need.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, both so far. Ivanka, what do you think? Please follow.
I've been thinking around two areas for potential mobilization. One of them is how we collaborate. I don't know if you would agree with me, but given the fact that we now live in a world which is becoming more and more uncertain, more fragmented even, in this context, I believe collaboration is not becoming less important. In fact, it is becoming exponentially more essential. So if for decades, what we've seen is international cooperation, which often is treated as optional, something that is desirable when it's convenient, but easily abandoned when political priorities shift, I think at the same time, many institutions designed for international cooperation, especially in the 20th century, are under strain. So my answer is not less collaboration, but fundamentally different architecture of collaboration. Probably collaboration that connects supranational institutions, national governments, cities, as Michael was talking about, the mayors, research institutions, civil society organizations, professional networks, in more flexible and dynamic ways. In other words, I'm thinking that we need coalitions of the committed people, networks of innovation, like Michelle was saying, that innovation from the field can really sometimes push political agenda better than data. Alliances that accelerate change. And that's why I'm very happy that ECOS Institute is existing now. And these leadership talks are a great way for us to shake the system and to have the breakthrough even better. And the second and last thing I want to share is that my feeling, I hope you would agree with it, is that too often we reinvent solutions that already exist in other parts of the world. So we lose speed and time, and early years go fast, as I said. What I mean is that if ministers, researchers, practitioners could easily access, especially now given the digital opportunities, to access a global map of what actually works in early childhood systems. For example, excellent policy models, legal frameworks, recent services innovations in other parts of the world, or system reforms, then we will shorten the time, which usually for a minister is very short. Give me good examples, something that we can adapt and replicate. And sometimes we invest time to generate this knowledge, and it already exists. So I believe these two potential areas for cooperation would probably give us a better speed in finding a good breakthrough. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think that we had a lot of food for thought in this final section. And let's see now what our participants are thinking, because I think that it has been quite enriching to hear so many perspectives. And lots of things we will continue discussing, as I was saying, even after this event will conclude. So let's see what our colleagues are saying. One thing we should stop doing: siloed programming, stop piloting initiative and move to scale. Materials development, it's true, there are lots of. I'm encouraging you to read also and then perhaps to share one of your thoughts. Speaking to ourselves and instead simplify our arguments. Go out and speak to those who don't understand the value of early years. And that's another topic, actually, and I appreciated, Michael, what you said, the cultural breakthrough. I think that it's another type of work that needs to be done, and as a kind of strategy of communication for the field, where we don't talk only among ourselves, but we talk with others. And when we say others, there are so many actors in society that perhaps that could be more sensitive to the topic, but they are not involved in those discussions. They are never approached, perhaps, on this discussion. We should stop accepting bare minimum commitments from policymakers. Very true. Look at ECD's silo program, but to recognize the interventions already being implemented within existing sectoral systems with governments. True, depending on simple interventions that have low impact in terms of child development, working in siloed. Let's see what we should start doing, and we will certainly use all these inputs in following our event. Getting to pre-service curriculum and also into school textbooks, working in partnership, particularly in government. That's a very good point. I think modeling coordination and collaboration needs to start also at that level too, because we might have in the field that even at this level of a local system, institutions that are collaborating, but that does not necessarily replicate at the higher levels always. Not start, but do more work on issues of language and culture, include the agenda in political manifesto for onset planning, to make strong coalition, develop early childhood intervention services in all countries, pay more attention to how to support parents who stay at home to raise, well, I think parents in general, I think parents are a goldmine for the field and has not been necessarily tapped into to the extent that they would deserve. What we should shift, let's see. Learning starts at grade 1. Well, that's that we should shift. Yes, very true. The discriminatory mindset, totally agree. The mindset that focuses on numeracy and literacy above a child's well-being and mental health. Well, in some places, I thought that we might have made that shift, but I'm sure that it's still somehow a recruitment is so fast that it's still existing. All UN agency, government, academia should think child comprehensively and get ECD at the center. Well, I hope I'm pretty sure that many of those that participate in this meeting are already convinced of that, and that's the work that we have still to do ahead. Early childhood as a new concept. Early childhood as new concept. That's interesting. What do you make out of this? What kind of stuck with you? If any of you, just freely to intervene. Any reaction if there is?
I think that there's been a few scattered around, a few messages about forming coalitions of the willing, if you want to say, or synergies. I would call them synergies. I think it's important to step out of this silo of early childhood education services and look for synergies with other services. But that is, of course, what these synergies, what they look like, or what the partnerships are, can be very different from one locality to another. From one, we can differ within one country and across countries and across continents. But it could be, for instance, with housing. It could be with nutrition. It could be with civil society. In the case of Flanders, there was a very strong policy shift on the moment that early childhood education had made coalition with the labor union that were formerly just interested in labor conditions, in the working conditions, which are important, as it was mentioned before, but were less interested in educational aspects. So when that shifted, policy shifted because of the civil society synergies that were made there. But in another country, it may be a different thing. But I think this is one of the things mentioned: form coalitions, step out of silos. That we need to look at alliances, and it's not always the most obvious alliances that are the most fruitful. I mean, yeah.
A very good point. Anyone else that would like to? Yes, please, Ivanka.
Something that resonated from the participants with me is to involve other change makers and passionate people for democracy and change. I truly believe that if we find these people, like Michelle is saying, probably in some countries it will be the syndicates, the labor unions, or it will be the employers, organizations who are thinking about better and more effective corporate social responsibility programs, or it will be digital innovators who want to bring digital innovations in different parts of the world and different spheres of life. Let us look for these people who also want to shake the system and to change the world to a better place, and let us win them as our ambassadors as well. And the second thing that resonated with me is to empower parents also to be advocates for change, because like in Eastern Europe, especially in Bulgaria, civil society is under radical attack of parties who are following the narrative that civil society organizations do not have a place in social sphere, education sphere, and health sphere. So we have to work more, as I said, to empower the leaders of ECD, but also to empower parents to really be the ones to also stand next to researchers, academia, people, and civil society to request change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivanka. Michael, Lynette, any words before we move to the closing? We are getting slowly there.
Yeah, I was just thinking, when I saw the comments, the one that really stood out for me was we should stop talking to ourselves. We will have big side events. When you look around the room, it's the same people saying the same things. We really need to have a strategy for how to work better with people like the media, with, politicians. Michael mentioned the importance of the power, the political power. And I was thinking sometimes we accept very small things. We will accept a symbolic win, political win, like being mentioned in somebody's speech. That's fine, but that isn't what is going to unlock financing. It's not going to result in workforce reform. It's not going to strengthen accountability. So shooting for the things that make sense and not just celebrating small tokens that usually are handed out by, the powerful people. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynette. Michael?
I guess my impression of a lot of the observations that the colleagues made were that there were some conventional ways of thinking or speaking that people are now questioning. So Lynette just described a little bit about this. Someone had written something about when learning starts. I mean, there's sort of a bunch of refrains and a bunch of standard operating procedures that people are raising as potentially less productive than they have been in the past. Michelle talked about the economic argument being so central. So it feels to me like there is an appetite in the room to if not abandon, reorganize at least some of the sort of conventional behaviors that we have developed as a community. And that makes sense. I mean, every community, every person goes through that kind of experience. So it feels like maybe we are moving, I don't know what developmental analogy to use here because I want to keep it within the first 5 years, but maybe we're moving out of early childhood. And so that there's new opportunities in terms of our executive functioning as a collective.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I think it's a very good reflection that all of us could have, individually and collectively in our own organizations, I think, and then across organizations operating in this field. Like, where are we really in this early childhood field in terms of in the way that we are acting, interacting, and reacting? In what stage of life are we, and how we could get better organized, and affronting the future that comes too late. So it's like, what are we going to do with our present, not let alone the future? Very much appreciated all the interventions. I think that Joan has been really nice, nicely waiting for us to conclude the discussion, to stop the discussion. And I think it's just time for her to come in. And thank you so much, Joan, for coming. You've been, we've talked a lot about narrative, systems, power, coherence, responsibility. But there is, I think, a deeper question: what kind of society do we want to build? That's something that perhaps, and it was said, perhaps we have something that everybody would be very much willing to talk about because there's so much need to feed people with some good hope and feel something that is comforting them rather than making them perhaps more threatened or insecure. So let's see, what do you think? What is your actually takeaway? I think there's been a quite rich discussion, I have to say, with so many entry points and perspectives. You've been so brilliantly navigating policy, academia, leadership across so many years, and you understand both the architecture and the politics of the field. So your insight, what we make out of all this discussion, would really help all of us. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic conversation. I really want to thank ECHOS for putting this together and to giving people a time to reflect, not to just have PowerPoints up there and talk at people, but to really have a discussion back and forth. I think we need much more of that. And I'm hoping that people in communities across the country, across the world, will replicate this process, take these questions and talk about them and have people talk about them. Before I kind of summarize what I heard and what I think, I want to acknowledge that we're all thinking of Ghassan Issa, and let this morning be a moment where we recommit ourselves to peace. Caring for children is the essence of peace, and we need to get up every day and remind ourselves of that. So I want to go back. I love that the conversation started with the progress we've made. And I do a lot of reflecting now in my elder years. And I want you to picture this. It was 1972. I was a preschool teacher in Boston. And what was happening around the world in that same year, in that same time period in the early 70s? In Kenya, they were just beginning to talk about preschool and have discussions with the government. In India, in 1975, they were just beginning the ICDS program. Okay, this is in my lifetime. In Jamaica, in 1972-73, they were piloting the Jamaica home visiting program, which we all build on now. So we have had tremendous progress. And I think we have to stop and maybe not celebrate every tiny piece, but overall, the arc of history has been in our favor. I think what's been difficult is it's not been fast enough for us for exactly the reasons that Ivanka pointed out, that childhood goes by so quickly. And, you go away from your child for a week and you come back and you see so many changes. And I think we have to remind policymakers of that. But so it took us 10 years after I started, and those things were happening around the world, for us to even have the child survival movement. Didn't come till 1982. 10 years after that, we got the Convention on the Rights of the Child, about 10 years, almost 10 years. It was 30 years after that Dakar happened. And we finally had a sentence that said, early learning begins at birth. What a breakthrough. Why did those things happen? They happened because of you. They happened because of all the advocates raising their voices. And, I think one of the comments in the chat was from someone who said, we've had no progress in some of the countries. That's my concern too, that we have progress in some places and no progress in others. And this is certainly not fair. And I couldn't underscore enough Lynette's point about the workforce. There is not any profession that volunteers on a daily basis, because that does not put food on your table. So we have to reassert our core value that shows rights and respects for the workforce. And I think ECOS is all about that. Why have we not, going back to the question, why have we not broken through? I think child development is complex. And so the terms that we've used have been reflecting many sectors. And we're still having this debate about care and education. I thought that was amazing. I do feel that care is the emotional word and the word that we parents often use. But we've been fighting a lot of misconceptions. The cultural comment about changing the culture. It's not a personal responsibility, the care of children. It's a public responsibility. That's a big we have to switch that. Learning doesn't occur in a building. It occurs everywhere. Health and child protection should not be after something happens. It should be prevention. We have to shift the funding from bombs to babies, because that is one of the key problems. We're spending so much on war, and we're not investing in what we know right now, and we have to call it out and stand up for it now more than ever. I think we have made progress. Nurturing care, that concept was brilliant because it brought all of our sectors together. We have to build on that. I think we're not putting enough focus on community and what communities bring. We bring programs into communities. We bring models into communities without listening to the community. So we need to do more of that. And over and over, we heard about leadership development. Leadership is not who sits at the head of the table. It's a round table. It's everybody. And what I kept hearing throughout the conversation was the importance of alignment with others. Parents are natural allies. We are parents, right? Elders are our natural. Elder care and child care together form a new culture of care that we're talking about. I think one of the brilliance of Urban 95 was that it brought in architects and it brought in city planners. When I was in government, I used to say to my staff, okay, look, you're ambassadors for young children. Go to the housing department, go to the Minister of Agriculture and talk about young children. Don't use terms like ECD. Talk about young children. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have to align right now with the climate movement, because we are a big part of the answer to the climate movement. We're creating a new generation that cares for the earth, and we're building resilience. They need us, we need them. And I want to emphasize that. So I'll end with this. I think breakthroughs come during times of disruption. We knew that from COVID. We learned that from COVID. I can't think of a more disruptive period than right now. So this is our moment. We have to stand up and demand peace. We have to demand that part of that means shifting our focus on children. We have to have a common vision and be persistent. And I'll end with my hope that we can spread joy in this moment that I know we all need. So thank you to ECHOS Institute and for all these brilliant comments.
Can't thank you more, Joan, and of course to all our fantastic panelists. Thank you, Michael, had to leave a little bit earlier. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Ivanka. Thank you, Lynette. This has been an amazing discussion, and I also hope the same as Joan was saying, this type of dialogues, these types of conversation have to continue, and not just here in ICOS. It should be multiplied in many countries and cross-regionally, cross-continentally. I will perhaps end by saying there are so many things that we could pick from this discussion, and I think now it's time to kind of let them sink a little bit in our minds and distill, and then we will have the recording of the meeting that we will share with all of you so that it can be useful further reflection and perhaps instill new discussions. I think that's also something that we would imagine. Well, we can understand that breakthrough is not a moment. It's a deliberate shift in the way that we organize ourselves. We speak about early childhood and we act about early childhood. So this is the first ECHOS thought leadership conversation, but it will not be certainly the last. And we are certainly, we hope that this will just not be inspiration alone, but it will also leave us with the intention what we will do differently tomorrow to make this conversation become part of our changing strategy. So don't forget to join us for the next event, Thought Leadership event, which will be, we talked about leadership. So we are going to look into leadership in early childhood education and care. How do we shift from roles to real capacity? I think that they carry a burden, and we talk about distributed leadership in the next meeting that will happen on April 16, and we will have it moderated by Geraldine Dibrow at the European Commission, who leads the working group on early childhood education and care. A lot of good things have happened there and shared across countries, but moreover, are trying to bring it to the larger audience of our community to understand better how we can drive the field by having powerful distributed leadership and competent one. So don't forget to also join the discussion that will follow up on LinkedIn and spread the word about the opportunities that we are providing under ECOS. Well, till next time, may peace prevail in our world. And again, huge thanks to all our colleagues that joined us today, our panelists, and everybody who's embarking on this journey. It has been a real pleasure. Thank you.